meeting, and we're gonna break down the role plays and also give you a lot of good advice about how to approach a role play. So if you haven't already, make sure you sign in. The password is tips. If one of you, if Emily or Caitlin, one of you guys could send that in the chat one more time, we're gonna move on to the next slide now. Okay, so a role play event is composed of two parts: your role play case study. Oh wait, one second. Emily, are you recording?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The role play case study, it composes 2/3 of your overall score, and that's like the bulk of like what you're preparing for. And we're going to go into a lot of depth about the individual role play. And then the test, we're going to be covering testing at our next meeting, and that contributes to 1/3 of your score. All right, so the role play is a scenario, and you basically adopt the role of adopt a role in a scenario, and your job is to stay in character the entire time. And so whether you're in finance or marketing or whatever category you're in, you have to propose a solution to the given scenario and address whatever questions the client, which is your judge, is looking to have answered. And this year, since we're going to be submitting videos instead of doing a typical in-person role play, we just wanted to clarify the timing. So for individuals, it's 10 minutes as usual, and you have to submit a 10-minute video. And for teams, you get 15 minutes for your video. And the thing is, there's no time for questions, so you have to be very thorough, especially this year, to make sure that you answer all of the performance indicators, which we'll go into more detail on the next couple slides, but you have to make sure that you answer everything that the prompt wants from you, because judges won't have a chance to ask questions to help you earn those points if you missed a certain talking point. So the case study, you have to record an unedited video, and what I mean by that is, yeah, you can try multiple times to answer the question. You're gonna have a couple days between when the question is released, when the scenario is released, and when you have to submit the video. But the recording that you ultimately submit has to be one full video. You can't do it in multiple takes and have one clip from the first take or whatever. You have to have the full case study in one video. And just some suggestions: make sure that your lighting is good, your audio is good, and that you are following the DECA business attire and you look neat and how you would want to look if you were actually going to a competition. Okay. So now we're just going to look at briefly what a role play case study is, because many of you might be new members and you just don't really know how to approach this. So we're going to go more in depth on another scenario, but this is just the basic things. They're going to give you a scenario. So here it says, you are to assume the role of a candidate for a full-time position in an operations department at this grocery store, Super Saver. So that first sentence is your role. And that's the person that you're going to be acting as. You have to stay in character as that role for the entire case study. Then they give you the judge's role. So it says that you've submitted your resume, and now you're getting a second interview with the director of operations. And it explicitly tells you that that is the judge. So the judge is also assuming a role in this case study situation. So you are trying to get this job, and the judge is the person who's deciding if you're going to get this job. And then it gives you some more information about what the judge is looking for. And then in the next paragraph, the write-up for the case study will tell you what your job in the next 10 or 15 minutes is, what you need to convey in your case study. So here it says you'll explain the importance of a safe work environment and describe and outline the proper procedures for handling an accident in the workplace. So this role play is dealing with workplace accidents and the importance of workplace safety. And that's what you're going to be addressing. All right, and now I'm going to pass it to Emily.
So performance indicators, okay, so you have two major things that you need to pay attention to when you're looking at your role play, right? One of those things is the scenario because the scenario tells you what's going on. But the second important thing that you really need to pay attention to are your performance indicators. And on the next slide, you guys will see what some examples of performance indicators are. But performance indicators are basically things that the judge is looking for you to address at some point during your presentation because they are relevant to the scenario. And all of those, or most of your performance indicators, will tend to fall under one related instructional area. So instructional areas, some examples of instructional areas are communication skills, financial analysis, uh, let's see, emotional intelligence. Those are some common ones that you might see. And your instructional areas are for district are released on Deca Direct before the fact. But beyond district, you'll only know what they are when you get there. And performance indicators can be somewhat intimidating because you're like, oh, I have to talk about all these things in my presentation. But performance indicators are actually really useful because they tell you how the judge or how DECA wants you to outline your presentation. So when you look at a performance indicator, DECA wants you to address that part for a reason. So you have to ask yourself, okay, why does this performance indicator matter to this scenario? How is it relevant? And why do they want me to talk about this? And the great thing about performance indicators is that while you won't be able to know what your scenario is before the fact, um, all the lists of every performance indicator you could ever see on a role play is available to you right now. So it's on our canvas, it's on deca.org, um, and it's divided into tiers. So there are three main tiers. And for district, you only have to look at tier one performance indicators because those are the only ones that could show up on your role play. And the main reason why performance indicators are so important, besides telling you what they're looking for, is that the majority of the points on your role play rubric are the performance indicators word for word. So the judge is literally grading a majority of your role play just based on how well you address those performance indicators.
And also, I want to add two things to this. The first is that this year, district competition is looking very different. So you're going to get your case study and you're going to have 2 or 3 days to prepare. So you can actually go very in depth and look into all of those performance indicators before you actually film your final case study, which is something that most roleplay competitors couldn't do in the past because you'd have to just study them beforehand. And the second thing is I forgot what the second thing is, so we're gonna move on. All right. Okay. So these are some sample performance indicators for the product and service management category, which is called or its instructional area. And I've remembered what the second thing is. The second thing is these performance indicators are explicitly listed on your case study. So they're gonna give you like the scenario. They give you your role, your judge's role, and then underneath that, they're going to give you the performance indicators that they're looking for you to address in this role play. So they're very explicit about what they're looking for. So here it says like explain the nature of product and service management. And so that has 7 performance indicators in this one. And you just have to address them, as Emily said, to get the most points that you can from the rubric.
Okay, so this is what you'll see when you get your role play. So the first thing you're going to see at the top is your instructional area. You're just going to want to make sure that's correct so that you're doing the right role play. And then you're going to see the name of your event, which you should also double check just to make sure it's right. And then you'll see the rules, which pretty self-explanatory. And then at the bottom is the performance indicators like Isha and Emily were talking about. While you're doing your planning, make sure you write these down so that you can go back to them after you've read your scenario. So you're going to get this, and then you're going to get your scenario. So read your performance indicators first, then read your scenario, and then go back and reread your performance indicators so that you know where to connect everything to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So this is what a judge's rubric would look like. And you can see here, you see those 5 performance indicators. So this would be for individual role play, which would have 5 performance indicators. You see that those performance indicators are word for word exactly the same on the judge's rubric. So if you're, this is actually the role play I did at district last year, but it says, if your performance indicator says explain the nature of staff communication, right there on the rubric you see it, explain the nature of staff communication, and that's up to 14 points. And then that's 70 points in total for your performance indicators. And then the other 30 points are covered by what are called 21st century skills. These are always the same, and it's on the DECA rules, on the roleplay rules. They're always the same, and it pretty much is just how well reasoned, and well presented is your role play in general. So judges are usually going to give you these points just on a basis of how much they felt like you knew what you were talking about and how much they felt that you were an effective presenter with an effective solution. At the bottom, you can see examples of preset questions judges might ask. For district, obviously, since you're sending in a video, there aren't going to be any questions this year, so that's not going to be a factor in how your role play is graded. But assuming that state and ICDC are still going to be the same as normal this year, which is still being decided, just know that the judge has questions that they have to ask you, and you should save a little bit of your presentation time, a couple minutes, to answer them.
And so as Emily was saying, like, this is like your content points. So 70 points, that's like how you want to organize your presentation. Is you want to make sure I hit performance indicator 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's your content points. And then this is your presentation points. So like, how creative was it? And did you stammer or become nervous or whatever? Or did you just present it confidently? And were you actually in character the whole time? So that's what these 30 points are for. Okay.
So when you're preparing, just the general guidelines are that you want, after reading your role play, after taking everything in, you want to start outlining it. And the thing about role play outlines is that every role player approaches this differently. So it's probably best to experiment and practice a bit and see what kind of outline structure works best for you when you're organizing your thoughts. But generally, you want to set up your outline, you want to underline or box, all those super important things like your performance indicators and the main points of your solution. And you can use an outline sheet, but you don't want to like be staring at it the whole time while you're presenting, right? It's just an aid to help you while you're presenting. For teams, you definitely want to discuss who's going to present which parts beforehand and have a plan. That way you can transition pretty much seamlessly between each other while you're giving the role play. You don't want to give the impression that even though you are preparing on a short-term notice, you don't want to give that impression. And you want to look like that you're very well prepared for your presentation. And then the last thing is visual aids. So how is this working at district? Because is it still the same?
Yeah, right now I'm under the impression that the same policy, like you can't do a very elaborate visual aid like the written events would be. Typically for role play, you just have to deal with the pencil and paper that they give you at competition. And I think that's where it currently stands.
Okay.
But if anything changes, then I will update you guys at the next meeting. But as of right now, you can just make your visual aids out of paper and like nothing of actual value. It can just be paper and pencil.
So assuming that, like, if we were pretending that we were going to district in person, you would just get 2 sheets of blank printer paper and a pencil, and that's all you have to make visual aids. But you definitely do want to make a visual aid, because that visual aid, especially if it's unique and it's creative, is going to help make your presentation that much more memorable for the judge, because the judge is going to watch a ton of the same role play prompt over and over again. So it's really, a lot of it is about making yourself stand out, and a visual aid is a great way to do that. So there are some visual aids that can be applied to pretty much any situation, and just looking at the role play, think of something really quickly that just might work. So for example, you could fold a piece of paper into like a laptop and pretend you have a slideshow with you. You could draw some charts or some diagrams. I've done T-charts to compare concepts. I've done fake bar and pie charts for like fake stats. I've made tons of business cards, although that's kind of like a last ditch effort since that's pretty generic. Or you could do, if you're in a marketing event, you could do posters, flyers, all those sorts of things. So there's a ton of different options that you can make with just a pencil and paper. And it doesn't have to look good because like you made that thing in 2 minutes with a pencil and paper and your judge knows that. It's more about the concept and how it fits with your presentation more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. And like something else that some people do, and I've done this before, is you can make slides. So like, because typically you won't have your laptop, so you can make your own kind of slides with paper, and they give you 2 papers to start with, but really you could ask for more. So, and since you guys are going to be at home, you can use as much paper as you want. You can make slides, you can be creative with all those things that Emily was mentioning. You just want to do something that will make your video stand out from the multitudes of other competitors. And we're going to give you some suggestions on how to do that in the comments. Okay, on to the next slide. So, so a general guideline of how to approach the role play is, as we were both mentioning, like it has to be unique. And so some ways that you can try to spice up your role play is you are given a scenario, you can maybe come up with like an acronym for your plan, or I did that last year, and it definitely makes it sound kind of cool and very put together. So maybe think of some words beforehand, or since you guys are going to have a couple more days, you can always think of an acronym to make your plans kind of pop, or you can do a slogan or a jingle, something to make your plan more memorable and catchy. You should also make sure that your case study is well thought out. Yeah, you don't have a lot of time to prepare for it, especially like if we're talking about state or ICDC, but you still want to make sure that your presentation makes sense and that you're actually addressing all of the questions that the case study is asking you. Some tips for before the competition is you can research the industry and kind of figure out what are some of the industry trends and how can you apply that to sound even smarter and even more relevant whenever you're addressing the specific scenario in your category. Typically, the judges that DECA brings in are experts in their fields. And so if they hear you talking about like very recent trends in the industry, then that's definitely going to catch their interest and make you stand out. You can also use business jargon if you've encountered like a nice phrase or something whenever you're studying, but make sure that you use it correctly because again, your judges are familiar with the field, and if you misuse the jargon, then you're going to actually probably do yourself a disservice because they're going to think that you don't really know what you're talking about. Also, make sure that you pay close attention to the guidelines of the event and like don't break any of the rules, I guess. And make sure, this is kind of crucial, make sure that all aspects of your idea are cohesive. So if you're answering the question and you answer one of the performance indicators in one way, make sure you like continue with that thread. Don't just go off in a bunch of different directions. Keep the idea cohesive and easily understandable for the judge. And so here it says, focus on one main course of action, no laundry list. It doesn't have to necessarily be just like one point, but make sure you're focused and everything makes sense together. So a sample roleplay outline is you start with your introduction. For this, you guys are going to be filming a video. So you can, you can't really like edit the video, but I think that maybe you can trim the beginning and ending so that, or someone else can start the video for you so that they don't see you getting up and down in the video. But make sure you have good posture, you're smiling at the beginning, and just exude confidence. It doesn't matter if you're feeling nervous. Don't let the judge see that. Just be as confident as you can be. Take a couple deep breaths beforehand and then start filming. Make sure that in your introduction, you mention your name, your position in the company, which they give you in the case study. Make sure you mention it, and also say the purpose of your presentation. It's a good way to open. Then, as you start, just give them a roadmap. So Summarize the scenario. The judge knows it too, but it's just good protocol. And also give them a quick outline of what you're going to be discussing. So that should be maybe 30 seconds. Then go into like the bulk of your presentation. This is where you're going to be hitting all of your performance indicators and proposing your solution. Also, this is a competition, so you are trying to convince them that your solution is the best. Be persuasive, and you can make sure that you're modulating your tone, you're not being monotonous, and just put on your best speaking skills. And then wrap it up. Thank your judge, who's your client, for their time, and make sure you end the video confidently.
So that's one outline option, and I think it's one that is probably the most common. But this is just another sample roleplay outline that I picked up personally last year and that I've been using, and it works really well for me. So if you're looking for different potential outlines that you think might work better for you, then this is good option. Basically, you just split your piece of paper into like 8 boxes. And then that first box, you just write down your intro, basically, the roles of yourself and the judge, the company, the purpose of the presentation, simple reminders if you need them. And then while I think the other outline that we just talked about kind of the main thing is the solution, and then you're just hitting all the performance indicators along the way. This one is you're hitting all the performance indicators and you're weaving your solution inside of them. And that kind of way of thinking works better for me in terms of just making sure that I hit all those performance indicators really well. So this is just personally what I use, and I think that it works really well for some people. And then at the end, you can also like leave reminders for yourself for the outro as well.
Mm-hmm. So this is a really good way, especially if we transition back to in-person competitions. This is a really good way to organize your thoughts and organize like what you're going to say. All right, so just some overall presentation tips. As you said here, first impressions matter. So you might not be meeting them in person, but you still want to make sure that you're giving off a good first impression. You are having good posture, you're speaking confidently, you're projecting your voice. You want to make sure they can actually hear you in the video, you have good lighting, stuff like that. Also, look at the camera. You can't really make eye contact, but it might feel a little bit weird, but try to look at the camera. If you have a partner, also make sure you look at your partner whenever they're speaking, act engaged. Here we have this, but you really can't do that for district. Maybe for future competitions you can, but a good thing to do is ask the judge questions, you know, make them make jokes and stuff throughout your presentation so that you're sure that they're actually listening and processing what you're saying. This is pretty important. Do not read off of your visual aid. You can have a paper with you whenever you're recording your video, whenever you're presenting normally, but make sure you're just referencing it from time to time. You're not relying on it as your only way of speaking. Don't ramble. You have 10 minutes or you have 15 minutes, depending on if you're doing a team or individually, but you don't need to fill up all your time. If you feel like you have to address everything you need to, that's good. But don't just speak to speak. Then this is especially applicable for if you're doing a team role play. Be flexible, and if something doesn't go exactly how you originally planned it, just go with the flow and don't act alarmed or anything. Add on to your, this is the yes and theory. Like, it's kind of like improv. If any of you guys do improv, don't contradict your partner. If they've said something extremely wrong, then you can like kind of discreetly correct them, but don't act like super shocked or something. You can just touch on it later in the presentation. And just keep on adding on to your partner's explanations. Try not to talk over each other. Make sure you have some sort of system worked out about who's going to talk about what. Especially, this is actually applicable regardless of if you're doing individual or as a team. Make sure you have smooth transitions between points and between people. And then partners, you guys should be speaking for an equal amount of time. And I mentioned this, like, make sure you look at each other. Like when one person is talking, don't just look at the ground or look at the camera. Look look at your partner and act engaged and be engaged in what they're saying. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about what a role play is, what performance indicators are, like, why don't we try one out? Just for all of our new members, we're going to briefly look at this hospitality and tourism, product service management sample role play, and we're going to just apply. Me, Emily, and Caitlin are going to just talk it through, and if you guys have any questions, you can unmute yourself or send it in the chat. So we can see that the performance indicators are to talk about product and service management, explain the concept of product in the hospitality and tourism industry, describe services offered by this industry, explain the nature of corporate branding, explain factors that motivate people to whenever they're choosing a hotel or a restaurant or whatever, differentiate between service marketing and product marketing, and then identify ways to segment these two markets. Okay. So it tells us that we are the director of brand management. So this is a team role play. We are the director of brand management and director of guest relations for this company, Weller International. And the company makes and manages franchises for several brands of hotels. And your judge is the senior vice president of Weller International, and is asking you to determine which brands should be used in this new project that services the brand and which services the brand should provide guests. So it tells us that our location is a suburb with over 450,000 people, and this project is being developed and it's called City Point. It has over 80 acres of space, and it's going to be a destination. Then it tells us there's an ice cream shop, and it's like mid-price to upscale companies. Art gallery, ceramics, a couple different businesses. And it tells us that our company has purchased the property leading into this project, City Point, to build the only lodging facility within 5 miles. So that's a pretty important detail. Although there are other lots available around the City Point, Weller will have the only hotel. So your judge is unsure which of the many Weller brands to pick for the City Point location. So your judge has narrowed it down to 3 options, and you guys as a team are going to have to pick that option. So on the next slide, Caitlin and Emily, you guys can read this one.
Okay, so the first option is a brand called St. Augustine, which is their luxury brand. And so they focus on exceptional comfort, including turn down service, top quality linens, butler service, all that stuff. And guest rooms are priced starting at $3.99 per night. Then you have option 2, Hotel Weller, which is just their kind of classic staple brand that offers all the traditional services you would expect from a hotel. Guest rooms are priced starting at $189 per night. And then the third option is Periwinkle, which is the boutique brand that they typically target at millennials, which adds character in various ways and makes each location distinct and with more untraditional services. And the guest rooms are priced starting at $189 per night. So the senior vice president or the judge basically wants us to pick one of those 3 options that fits best with this location and suggest what kind of services and amenities that whichever one we pick should offer to the guests.
Mm-hmm. So now they've given you all this background information. They told us that it's like mid-priced upscale companies are typically dominating this space. It tells us it's a suburb and it has a population of over 450,000 people. And then it also gives us like some background information on City Point. So based on that, we're going to try to choose one of these 3 options. And so my immediate thought is option 3. And I'm just thinking that because it's a boutique brand and it seems like affordable, or it says mid-scale to upscale. And I also feel like it kind of contributes to the whole vibe that this City Point project is trying to give off. So what are your 2 thoughts? Like the 2 of you guys, what do you guys think?
would definitely agree with you. And one thing that actually caught my eye immediately is that one of the performance indicators that they gave us was identify ways to segment the hospitality and tourism markets. So I already know in the back of my mind that at some point I need to talk about like market segments and how we target specific market segments. So when I read that option three is typically targeted at millennials, that light kind of goes off in my mind immediately like, oh, that would be a really easy connection to make and a really good way to hit that PI. So I'm already just leaning towards that based on not only from the scenario perspective, but just from a role play perspective in general.
Mm-hmm. Because you also want to make sure that the option you choose addresses these. And then, Caitlin, do you agree with option three as well?
I would definitely agree with option three. And I would like to point out that it says one of the performance indicators is explain factors that motivate people to choose a hospitality and tourism site. And location three offered a lot of different like fun things. Like it was like themed rooms, like different it was really unique, and a lot of people are going to move towards that as opposed to like just plain hotels that we see all the time. So that's another way that you can hit on one of the performance indicators.
Exactly. And so there's like you're gonna have to like pick out a couple more details to address all of the 7, but those are 2 great examples that they mentioned. The first is that they tell us that Periwinkle is specifically targeting millennials, so that goes to the market segmentation performance indicator. And it also says that it offers like goldfish and biking and really unique rooms, and so those are things that are going to draw people to stay at that hotel, which is the only hotel in a 5-mile radius. And so you're going to look at things like that, and you have to approach your case study and try to like get all the details that you can from what they give you. And that's typically how you approach a case study. So now, does anyone have any questions about how to approach a case study? Or if you think of one like later, you can always send it in the chat. But if not, we're going to just move on to like some basic guidelines. Okay. Just send it in the chat if you guys think of any, or unmute yourself.
Okay, so first, professional dress is kind of just a basis of one of our rules. You will need to follow this rule even for sending your videos, even if we continue to do this video sending in. So first we have for both males and females, a blazer is required the whole time. So in this instance, when you're filming your video, you're going to have to keep your blazer on the entire time. For males, you need to wear a collared dress shirt, slacks, a necktie, and dress socks and dress shoes. I know they might not be able to see it in the video, but I think business dress makes me feel more confident anyway, and you should probably just get used to wearing it to begin with. So I would just wear it even if they can't like see your shoes or something. And then for females, again, you have to keep your blazer on the whole time. A dress blouse. If you're wearing a dress blouse, you can wear slacks or a skirt, but skirts and dresses have to be knee length. I know they might not be able to see it again, but I'm telling you guys, you grow out of them so fast. So make sure you double check. If you have clothes from last year, make sure you double check that they're still knee length. I had that problem last year. It was really stressful.
And I mean,
so
for district, you can kind of like, you have a little bit of leeway for district because like it doesn't truly, like you're not going to get called out for it. But if state happens normally and then you go to state and you have a problem with that, they are going to call you out on it.
They definitely will call you out. So heels or flats, wherever's comfortable. We won't really be walking around during districts, obviously. And like I said, they probably won't be able to see your shoes. But just for future reference, if we do have in person, just be prepared that that's what you need to wear. And then just keep your jewelry and like makeup and everything modest. You don't want to be like too flashy. Yes, you want to stand out, but you don't want to be too flashy at the same time.
Mm-hmm. So basically all of this is just business professional dress. DECA is a business club, and they want to just get people in that mindset. And it also, as Caitlin said, it definitely makes you feel like more prepared for competition. Being all dressed up like that makes you feel pretty good. And if any of like getting any of these like clothes is like an issue, then just speak to one of the officers and we can help you like get a blazer or whatever you need. Okay. So some key takeaways, come up with a unique idea or some way to make your proposal unique. Everyone is addressing the same prompt, So you want to stand out. Then make sure you follow the guidelines and keep your performance indicators in mind. Incorporate the business's principles. Sometimes they will give you that. So incorporate those business's principles whenever possible. Make sure that your overall presentation is cohesive and follows like an understandable train of thought. And you can do a lot of practice. There's tons of resources linked in our Canvas page for sample role plays. And there's also a lot available on the internet. So practice as much as you can, especially if you're doing it with a teammate. Competition is early this year, so we only have until December 7th. So do as much practice as you can. Try to do role plays from different instructional areas. That's the thing that it will say on the top, like what instructional area it is. And you can always have like a friend just watch you present your role play and give you some feedback. And then you can also do practice tests. We're going to be going over more testing at our next meeting. This year, testing is open book, so I don't think it will be that much of an issue. But you also want to make sure that you're researching this content and studying it because it's going to help you succeed on your role play.
Okay, so just kind of like a 5-step summary of how to approach a role play. And there's a lot of variation, so you need to figure out the system that works best for you. But basically, read your scenario, summarize it, then discuss with if you have a partner, or just think about how you're incorporating all your performance indicators into that scenario, into your solution towards that scenario. And then you take those last couple minutes and just create a visual aid that goes with your presentation. And then if you have extra prep time, practice your presentation. So since you have all that extra prep time for districts this year, I would definitely recommend practicing it at least a couple of times before you actually get your final recording done. But even at state, if you have extra prep time and there's like one section maybe that you want to go through before you run out of time, then practice.
Mm-hmm. And finally, some upcoming dates.
So first things first, membership dues. And if you're wanting to change your competition, you have to do that by Friday. For membership dues, please make sure that you've paid them. Even if you've signed up for a competition, you will not be competing if you are not a paid member. And if you think by some chance your parents paid under the recipient name instead of you, just message me if you're worried about it. I figured out most people, but please tell your parents to check their emails as I'm still trying to figure out some people's names. We still need professional members and judges. The professional member assignment is in Canvas, and you can send your receipt there after you've paid, and make sure your parents' name or whoever you signed up to be a professional member is also on the receipt. This way you'll receive lettering points, and if you're one of the first 20, you'll receive one of the cool lanyards. The gift cards are due by November 6th. That is the district community service project. The testing and information meeting will be November 18th. That one's going to be pretty simple. Like Isha said, it's going to be open book, so it shouldn't be too bad. The role plays will become available December 3rd through 5th, so you'll be able to look at your role play and start planning out what you want to do. Maybe look into different things and information, as Isha said. District competition will be on December 7th, and competition testing will be December 7th through 10th. Our chapter has to pick a specific day for testing, but we'll let you know when we've picked that specific day.
Yeah. I think the most important thing, though, is if you haven't paid your dues, you should do that, like, right after this meeting. The links are on Canvas. They've been there for, like, 2 months now. It's very, very important that you get those things paid if you want to compete.
Please pay your dues.
And I just sent them in the chat as well. Also, if you go to twcpdeca.com, they're on our homepage. You can only access the due payment through this link because School Cash Online's system has changed. So if you haven't paid already, make sure you get that in. And now, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I'll go back to the first slide.
Yeah, roleplay questions, roleplay tips, general DECA questions.
Yeah, and I hope that like by going over those sample role plays is especially helpful for new members who haven't approached a role play before. So if you guys have any specific questions, go ahead and ask, and we will help you. If not, if you're good, then the meeting is over and you're free to go.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you all for coming.